Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Open Dialogue. I firstly want to wish all the viewers Eid Mubarak. Inshallah, everyone that's also traveling from Hajj have a safe journey back home and all your a'mal, du'as and pilgrimage is accepted. I want to wish you all a very, very blessed Eid. And today we're going to be continuing with topics that are going to be socially, discussed about what we are dealing with. And this is another topic that I've been asked by clients and personal friends that does not really give much time, especially in the channels. And I want to bring this to everyone's attention, which I think a lot of us, if we're not experiencing it ourselves, we know at least somebody who is. And today's topic is going to be discussing and dealing with learning disability. I think that we sometimes forget that there are struggles within individuals, and it's not just children, it's adults as well that have some sort of issue with regards to disability. And we're going to concentrate on learning disability, but just disability even as a whole. I know that the community, especially in our religion, we sometimes have our own prejudice and assumptions. We want to either disguise it or sometimes ignore it, and we just sometimes may be a little bit ignorant and not aware of what actually is really happening around certain people that are experiencing this. So I have always had experts and professionals on the show in order to give their insight to help us with this awareness and to bring in some sort of knowledge, some sort of sort of learning, so that we can all deal with these issues much, much better. Today I have with me, of course, the renowned Sayyid Razavi. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much. Always a pleasure to have you here. And today we also have a special guest, Farzana Hirji Karawali. Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for joining me. I know you are so busy. I know that you're working, you have a family, but you also have a really important job and you deal with this. So without further ado, I'm not going to speak about what you do because I think you have lots to share and I think you can only say it best. So please introduce what exactly that you do so that we have callers. It's a live show. If you have any questions, queries or comments, please do call in and the number is written below. So tell me a little bit about, or everything as to what you do, because I know there's a list.
Basically, I am a learning disabilities nurse as well as a social worker. So I work with people with learning disabilities and people that are generally vulnerable, adults or children, safeguarding. I also work as a life coach, so I support people through that route as well. I'm also a trainer, so I also train schools, nursing homes, residential homes and places like that, just to support them in areas of learning disability and other areas.
And how long have you been doing this for?
Since just a bit before 2007, so I qualified in 2007.
Amazing, amazing. So when we're talking about disability, Sayyid, what is it that we can sort of take away from our religion? And especially I know our Prophet, peace be upon him, showed humility and respect to people with disability. And unfortunately in the community, sometimes we shy away from people or we avoid them. So what lessons can we learn and what is our responsibility towards people that are experiencing these sort of abilities and illnesses?
First of all, I would like to also congratulate everyone for the auspicious Eid al-Adha. In some countries, they celebrate up to 3 days.
Yes, of course. Yes.
And I was watching some channels. The celebration are
still
ongoing.
Going. Yes, definitely.
So those who are still celebrating, we congratulate them, and we hope and pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that inshallah Muslims would celebrate this Eid with the Imam of age, Imam Mahdi Ajallallah Ta'ala Fajahu, very soon. As far as the subject is concerned, Islam, according to Islamic teachings, mustada'afin is the word used for the people who are somehow challenged.
Yes.
they could be, although commonly this word is used only for people who are oppressed and suffering around the world, but it has a very wider meaning. It also includes the people who are suffering in any form.
Any form, yes.
It could be mental illness, it could be physical illness, although old age has been referred to as a necessary part of human being in the verses of Holy Quran and practice of holy Imams, and continuous guidance has been given to the children, especially, that they should look after and take care of their parents the way they took care of them when they were young. So this shows that whatever happens, it's the responsibility of the children to take care of them. But as far as the culture is concerned, if you look at the Muslim countries, we are far behind in the proper care of the elderly. Although in olden days, when extended families was a norm,
Yes.
all these things were taken care of very, in a very satisfying way. But nowadays, usually, as soon as an illness is discovered or disability is discovered, the families try to dump them with the excuse of let's give the child or person to the professionals, and they are even elderly people are handed over to old age
Yeah.
people or homes.
So you're saying that it's actually more a responsibility for ourselves to look after and not put them in care homes?
Where it is necessary, yes, care home, professional care is definitely needed. I mean, but I don't think any of the elders or any of the people who are suffering from illnesses would want to stay away from family and left alone.
Absolutely.
It's part of healing process to be with maybe people who are suffering from some kind of disability. They would prefer to be with the family, with the friends, and they would like to have a normal life like anyone else.
Sure.
But unfortunately, in the countries, in Muslim countries, disabilities are not taken care of. I know several cases where some of my friends who had a disabled person, they thought it would be better to move back to like either Africa or Middle East or Far East and look after their disabled person there. Although it's easier to get servants and cheaper to provide these kind of services.
Yeah.
But they were not able to, especially if there was a mental illness or mental disability.
Yeah, you need professionals.
They are not taken care of properly. They immediately are looked at as they call diwane or pagal, and they refer them as majnoon, which is wrong. I mean, this is what we need to educate and train Muslim communities, that they should take care of these elderly and these people who are in need of our help better than what they do. And we should look at the examples of Prophet Muhammad and Holy Imams, how they were considerate and caring about all these people. Prophet Muhammad has been repeatedly quoted, and it has been narrated that he used to go especially help these kind of people, even people with severe illnesses who had the possibility of transferring the illness to others. They didn't care. They used to go and provide food and help and assistance for them.
Sure. Thank you for that. So Farzana, I want to go more into what exactly you do. I know that you work generally in London, but do you find that there's a particular community that has this sort of issue, or are we in our community lacking some sort of experience and knowledge to deal with this?
I think it's obviously there's a taboo there. In the past, I remember growing up and not seeing many people with disabilities or learning disabilities, any children with learning disabilities. I'd find in the mosque Ashura Day, you'd find a lot of people would bring their family members that have any physical or learning disability, and then you wouldn't see them again. Maybe it's just difficult to bring somebody with significant disabilities out into the community environment, because obviously there are emotional triggers that could cause them to have maybe behavioural issues, or it could there could be emotional triggers that would cause them to feel anxiety or low. So that could be the reason why when I was growing up I never used to see people with disabilities as often. But I would say now more so, especially within my community, there's a lot of integration of people, the children with disabilities in particular, and also adults with disabilities.
Do you feel that the mosques and the centres maybe accommodate for this, or does it still need a bit more work?
There's always more work. We can never say we've done or we've done enough. There's always more that we can do to accommodate people. But I know that within the centre that I go to, we have special classes for people, for example, that have a hearing impairment with sign language. We have the young children that have learning disabilities are accommodated within the classes that are run during programs, and even within madrasa.
Right.
There's a special wing where helpers come in to support, in particular, people that have children that have disabilities, to sit with them through an Islamic lesson, so that they're actually engaging and understanding to whichever level is appropriate for them.
Right.
But not just sitting there just in a class and not understanding anything. So, but there's so much more that can be done, whichever way. Either.
Do you find though that our community as a whole are accommodating to this, regardless if the school has them, but just generally sitting, say, in a majlis? Would you see that there is children or young adults or any kind of adults with these sort of abilities, that there is a space for them?
There's always a space. I don't see there's an issue, but I think it's the taboo that holds people back from coming themselves.
What is the taboo?
I mean, this might be past discussions that people have had. I know there's been stigma in the past that if somebody has a child with a disability, it's because of something that the parent has done.
Okay.
And we know that's not the case. A child that has a disability in some ways is a blessing, because there's so much more we can learn from that child.
Yes.
So I don't see it as an issue, but there is stigma from past history, people's perceptions and assumptions, and that governs how people feel about bringing their own child with a disability into a community, particularly if it's a community they don't really know very well. And that would hold them back. And so in a sense, we're depriving those children with disabilities from what we regard as sacred, what we regard as very strong for our hearts. Going for a majalis, it gives us so much sukoon, so much peace.
Of course.
And we're depriving our children that have disabilities from doing that, and adults as well.
Absolutely. And I think also the only way we're going to learn is if we have ourselves integrated with all types of people, so that we can actually have the respect and we can have the understanding if we are all placed in these sort of situations together. And if there isn't an accommodation, then there should be one, because there is someone there to accommodate. So I know of a lot of cases myself where people feel because there's not a facility, or there's not the welcoming, inviting sort of atmosphere, it shouldn't really hinder you. In fact, you're going to actually bring upon a learning for that, and I think it's really important. On the other hand, there's so many different types of learning disability, really. So What kind of sort of learning disabilities have you come across that's quite common known, that may be seen or may not be seen, and there's normally a label for it, and how can we sort of learn from that, so to maybe recognize it ourselves if maybe, you know, the professionals can't see it?
It's not easy always to determine if somebody's got
There
a
is a
learning
test,
disability.
right, for certain things that we
Yes,
can take?
very early on. So it's about milestones, if a child is meeting milestones, and a learning disability can be developed for different, different issues, different reasons. There are many different types of learning disabilities. I think the key is that we need to have respect for anyone, regardless. Because for us to understand every learning disabilities can be very difficult. But if you find that somebody is not able to engage a particular way, or is behaving a particular way, or is anxious, or we need to learn to reach out. We shouldn't dismiss and walk away and think, no, it's not my business. We need to reach out to that person and find out what support we can give them or the family members. And that goes back to what you were saying about inclusion.
Yeah.
You can't just have inclusion. You've got to reach out.
Absolutely, absolutely. Sayed, when we go to the mosques, and I have a lot of parents, like I talk to students, I talk to the children, I talk to parents, I am, really well informed with the people on the ground. And I'm not just making this up, I work with people professionally, and I do sort of tend to engage with people that are not normally heard. So I hear a lot of stories when, yes, we attend the majlis and children have to sit down, they have to behave, and sometimes there's not a space for them. And we have, the excuse that the elderly cannot handle a child that's running around and it's disturbing and things like that. And yes, we should have respect, we should have discipline, but a child is a child at the end of the day, and they do have their stages. So how can we as adults still learn and accommodate for this? Because we don't know if that child can actually sit still, and should they be able to really be still, and if they're not, to be excluded with their parent who has actually come to learn just like you. And the attitude of some people not being understanding for those children who will learn, even if they're just taking one sentence away. Is that something that we need to reform a little bit?
Yes, again, we find in practice of Ahlebait that when they used to see a dispute going on between children, they didn't used to order them, or they didn't used to address them in a very aggressive manner. They used to bring themselves down to the level of the child and establish eye contact and speak to them as equals.
Course.
And that is how they conveyed the message to even a minor, even a child. In our society, usually the children are just told off, and they are just told just to shush
and sit down.
And at the same time, we don't provide any services for them equal to their level of understanding.
Absolutely. Sorry, we do have a caller online. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, brothers and sisters.
Thank you for calling. What would you like to say?
MashaAllah, I love the fact that you're actually mentioning something, that Islam actually is there to protect these vulnerable children.
Absolutely.
And one of the concerns I want to raise you as a parent of an autistic son, MashaAllah, we've got these schools at the moment that are educating the children. But these children that they're educating, they're not the most vulnerable in our society. Any measure for our society is how we educate and protect the most vulnerable.
Yes.
You see our Islamic schools, our institutions, our mosques. It's these children that need to be embraced. These children are our way to learning humanity. My son teaches me humanity. My son, mashallah,
How old is your son?
He communicates with his behavior. He can socialize.
Sorry, how old?
Struggling to get him the support that he needs at school. The intelligence of these children, I think the potential isn't realised. My son, mashallah, when I'm praying, mashallah, he'll come to me with his arms playing, he'll come and stand next to me, and he'll follow all the movements that are needed for prayer. When he knows that the time of prayer is there, mashallah, without me, having to force him to do anything.
Yes.
Alhamdulillah, naturally, he'll come and stand with me and he'll enjoy it, and mashallah, he'll be smiling. And, you know, just for me to see him, to see that spiritually, mashallah, I can learn from him. You know, the child cannot communicate. Put yourself in that position. You cannot communicate, but you still have a smile on your face. Subhanallah.
Definitely.
You know, and my message out there is for our institutions, especially our schools. You know, it's like the doctors that are treating the patients who are well. Doctors should be there to treat the patients who are ill.
Absolutely.
Similarly, teachers should be there to teach the children that are struggling to learn. Our Islamic schools should be at the forefront of those children who have disabilities, and the parents and families, you know, they seem to be keeping these children indoors where they need to come out, and the community needs to be there for them, sisters and brothers.
Absolutely. I so appreciate your call. Thank you so much for calling, and everything that you've said is exactly what I wanted to hear, and this is what we, you know, having the show for, because we want to educate, we want to bring out more of these issues so that we can actually be at the forefront, because this is religion. This is our religion living. And thank you so much for calling. So what was your insight on listening to that? Because I think that's amazing what he's just said, and you know, this is exactly why I have these sort of topics and shows and bringing people like yourselves and the Sayyid to give this sort of learning. And it is also definitely the responsibility of our Islamic schools. Like, we have English schools as well that, you know, they will, you know, basically portray and display the children that are doing really well, but we have to be there for the ones that really need it as well. And we need to do that much more, coming from the belief that we do. And so, like, do you feel that, you know, this is something that we can work on a little bit longer and stronger for our community?
For sure. I just want to go back to the caller. I picked up on, he was saying about by action, what he does by action, his child follows. And I think that that's the key, really. And that's a message in Islam anyway that we have throughout, that we have to behave or do things in a certain way that sets an example for our children.
Definitely.
So, I mean, it shows clearly that even a child with a disability is able to pick up on routine, structure,
Absolutely.
you know, things that we do in our religion, in our culture, that mean so much to us. Our children can pick up on that even without being taught. But going back to what you've just said, that can we do more? Can we do things? Well, I am part of a community in Stanmore, Stanmore. Within the madrasa there, like I said before, we have
I know they do a lot.
section,
Yes,
that deals with people with disabilities. And I think this can be done everywhere.
Yeah,
this can be done
it
everywhere.
should be done everywhere.
Yeah. I mean, we have so many professionals now, alhamdulillah, within the UK, speech therapists, nurses, social workers, all kinds of other medical professionals as well, that have some insight into learning disabilities. And now even within schools, teachers are also trained
Absolutely.
around learning disabilities.
Yeah.
So we can use these professionals within our community to support us to set up some kind of a system, some kind of a service within the madrasa, where the kids can learn through different means, through different. I mean, they don't have to learn by just hearing.
Yeah.
Even by using particular, you know, just sand. You can write letters in sand.
Of course, there's different variations.
You can use textile, different materials to feel different words and letters in Arabic as well, if that is what you want to learn, if it's Arabic. Through stories, bring stories to life using different things, like, for example, if the story is about a garden, then bring flowers and then give the story. And it can be acted. It's so many different ways of teaching children generally and with disabilities.
I think you've highlighted something really important, which has always been on my mind. And as much as, you know, we don't have to be professional, but we have to be innovative, and we have to take that interest and care. And I think as parents, as well as, you know, teachers, especially in the Arabic schools, we need to really bring ourselves up to those levels to actually make ourselves, you know, go the extra mile for people with the ability. And for the general community, we need to change our attitude. We need to be more inviting. And as we were talking earlier before the caller with Sayed, with regards to being more accommodating, you know, children are our future. As much as we want to concentrate on things, they need to also be alongside us. That little disruption, you know, we can't have it perfect in complete silence all the time. In fact, a lot of the women alone, without children, can have, you know, more conversations and be more disruptive, but nothing will be done and said. But the children are pushed to one side with their parents and sitting in a place where they don't have the right, you know, setting or the things. And if they are sitting in a space amongst the rest, there is nothing wrong with that. A little bit of, you know, movement, a little bit of something. And I think, you know, the viewers and everyone that's watching and people that are out there need to take that into consideration. And Sayed, when it comes to learning, there are different stages and ages, and I know that we need to challenge our children. I know we had this conversation earlier, and I always say that we need to take extra care when we are teaching our children. And I know that in the secular English Western education, they have got this somehow imprinted to a certain extent, but even still that is being tested because we are teaching our children earlier and earlier, which is fine. A lot of them can be capable. But a lot of studies have shown recently, even in the wider world in Europe, that children are learning and having better well-being when they are taught at the age that is recommended. Even in Islam, it's recommended at a later age. And of course, they are going into education, and the curriculum in the Arabic schools can be a little bit tough when they're starting from the age of 4 and expecting to do so much at a young age, and if some of them are not capable, then they are standing out, and that can be detrimental for their learning in the future, and it can actually hinder them wanting to continue in the future, which is actually important. That's when they're accountable. I speak to a lot of students and they don't like the Arabic schools, they don't want to be part of it, when it should be fun learning, it should be part of religious teaching, not just, you know, being so abrupt and brushing them all with one stroke, and they have to do this because it's right, it's wrong, it's haram, you know, this and that. And what do you think needs to be the reforming, and can you sort of maybe give us the stages that we have to learn in, even though we need to challenge our children, but are the Arabic schools actually in the right form with their curriculum, especially with the early learning stages?
There is an Arabic saying, and also there is a narration that whatever you learn in the early childhood remains like a carving in the stone.
Yes.
In your mind.
Yes.
And I have met and seen and spoken to many scholars, my teachers. They have become ayatollahs and maraja taqleed, but they say that what their mother taught them without professional lessons
At an early age.
has remained in their mind, although even Islamic Sharia doesn't say about it.
Fair enough,
or doesn't emphasize on it. But that practice has remained in their mind just like a carving in the stone.
Okay.
And that's why, from Islamic point of view, there's no doubt we should learn from the cradle to grave. But the method of learning,
Yes.
it is not necessarily academic.
Yes.
There is a stage where we need to academically learn things, but what remains in the mind and molds a child is the behavior of the family members and people around the child in early stages of their life. And that's why there is a narration that let the child play for first 7 years. It doesn't mean that we should not teach. We should teach them while we are playing with them.
Yes.
If we don't tell a child the cup is hot, how he would learn? He has to learn, or she has to learn that cup is hot, and if you touch it, you will burn.
Yes.
It doesn't mean that we should not teach. Teach them by example. Teach them by setting examples in front of them. But from the age of 7 to 14 is the time for boys and girls both.
Yes.
To start what is halal, what is haram, and that is the period that you can give them the theory and the text and the speeches or lectures, whatever you want to tell them.
Yeah.
And after that, again, it comes the period where you have to be friends with them. You cannot, you can no longer dictate them. You have to. Let me give you an example that Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to give adhan, and that's the tradition nowadays as well. That when a child is born, we usually give adhan and iqama in the ear of the child. So a lady brought her child for adhan and gave the child. During those days, they didn't have nappies or things like that. So they used to just give the child like that. And while Prophet Muhammad was doing adhan, the child urinated, and the mother got so embarrassed that she snatched the child away from Prophet Muhammad. And Prophet Muhammad, instead of being angry on the urination of the child on him, he became angry with the mother.
Okay.
He said, "Why did you do that?" He said, "This urine can be washed.
Yes.
But by snatching, the scar you have created in the mind of the child cannot be washed away. You can wash urine." So Prophet Muhammad was aware of the mental scars of rough behavior with the children. So this is how we need to educate if a child is growing with us, we have to create an environment, friendly environment, so the child learns to be friendly with others. Most of the dictators in the world had severe experiences of roughness in their family life, and that is what resulted into their behavior, and they became cruel. So we need to educate, and only this Eid I was giving khutbah in Bab al-Murad. I told that majority of the teachings of Ahlebait and Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was not given by lectures. It was by setting example. If you look at the khutbahs of Prophet Muhammad and Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib wa Ahlebait alayhim sallam, you would not find a khutbah which could be which could take more than 20 minutes. They never gave khutbahs longer than 20 minutes. And Imam Ali is known to be very, he used to give advice in a very short sentences. And there is a hadith as well that the best of the word or best of the wisdom is what, when it's short and precise.
More impact, yes.
You give the right message at the right time. For example, if the child is misbehaving, you should tell the child in a very polite manner that it doesn't create a negative reaction.
Yes.
So this is how we should deal with each other, whether we are disabled or healthy.
I think what you've said is so significant, and it's the crux of everything that we're trying to emphasize here, especially with the treatment of children. We know as adults with personal development how when people have certain sort of disadvantaged emotions or not very good well-being or depression and anxiety, it does stem from the childhood. And I think that we do need to be more aware of how we are treating the children in the mosques, centers, madrasas. And when we're trying to teach them Islamic education, it's not just the academics, and parents as well. They need to know that in the first years, it's not about sending them to school and that's their job done, because they need to set the example, especially with the discipline, the manners, the akhlaq, the etiquette. That comes first. That's real teaching, and that builds the character. And that's why even the Arabic schools are struggling, because that first and foremost is not being taught, and it's the parents' duty and responsibility to have that in place, and then for the teachers to sort of reinforce that, and then be able to teach the children in a different manner through play or depending whatever stage they're at. So we know that even people with learning disability, they also have emotional needs, and they have certain behaviors that we have to be accommodating for. So what sort of things would you like to highlight so that we can be aware of this and we can actually, better ourselves?
I mean, that goes back to the caller when he was saying about his child obviously struggling to communicate, and it shows through behaviour. And just like any of us, when we're upset, if we're unable to say in a particular situation we're upset, we'll either become very tearful or we'll become very angry. And that works the same with children with disabilities and even adults with disabilities. To some extent, there's an expectation of an adult with a learning disability that we don't have in a child. However, that learning disability that adult has still prevents them from understanding the social norms the way we see it.
Absolutely.
So to prevent issues, in a sense, there needs to be some level of predictability within their lives, some level of structure within their lives. So even if we're doing the 0 to 7, for example, if I go back to that as an example, there still needs to be structure even though there's no active teaching. So it's sort of free reign that the child can just do whatever they want for 7 years. But there's structure, and that structure allows them to understand some level of social norms and boundaries, so that they're within a society, they understand what is safe for them and what is not. Because if they don't understand that, and obviously it takes longer, and if we're doing it by example, we need to be demonstrating it through structure, through routine and social norms. But I would say that people with learning disabilities, if they need emotional support, you do need to get professional help.
Of course.
There are a lot of people that I've worked with that have a dual diagnosis. That means they have a learning disability and mental health. And I've got that in particular through the nursing work that I used to do. And still occasionally do. And with that, obviously there are the issues that we experience in mental health as people that don't have learning disabilities is very different to what somebody with a learning disability experiences, because we can still have talking therapies and communicate our issues. A lot of people with learning disabilities aren't able to, even if they go for talking therapies, aren't able to let out what they need to say.
Yeah, absolutely.
So their expressions would be, again, through behaviour and other ways. So we need to understand how we approach somebody with a learning disability, how we work with them.
How do we work with them and how do we approach them then?
A bit like what the Sayyid was saying, that we need to get down to their level first. We need to first observe them and understand them, especially if they've got anxiety. What you don't want to do is feed into the anxiety. So if a child with a learning disability has anxiety issues, ask you lots of questions. Questions is excellent. The more somebody asks, that's very good, because you can teach so much through them questioning you. They will learn much better. However, if you pick up that each time you feed into that questioning, they become more anxious. For example, the child asks, okay, we're going to go out, where are we going? And you tell them where you're going. And after that, where are we going and what are we doing? And you tell them that. And then all they can see is what's happening ahead, because what they're looking for is their safety. They're looking for their comfort. They're looking for something that's going to give them some level of sukoon. And they're not getting that from what you're saying, because you're actually taking them,
leading them
out. So it's too much for them to comprehend. So for example, in a situation like that, you don't want to answer too many questions and actually divert them a little bit.
Right, refocus,
And then when they get to a point where they are able to take some more information, then you can give it to them. So there's many different issues that they would experience. But
that was a great example. That's a great example. And I think what also came to mind when you were speaking for me was also not just taking into consideration about the people that have the learning disability, but the people that are actually responsible in coping with the children or the adult or the teenager that has the disability, and they themselves need the skill, they need the patience, they need the understanding, they need support. It's really, really tough, and I think that as we said even before, to hold yourself back is not necessarily helpful. I know some mums personally that have set up WhatsApp groups that have actually reached out and just to openly talk about their struggles, their suffering and what they're going through, and to each one lend a hand to each other, because you might just realize that if you're not the only one, it can actually give a little bit of sort of satisfaction, or just learn through different techniques, different ways, because we can't take it all in. We all have different ways of dealing with things, and we all have different stages, and I think that's really important that we don't just mix also with people that say, oh, you know, your child has a learning disability, my child has it, and we kind of just group all the time. And then you also have families which one child does have a learning disability and the other one doesn't. And then sometimes the other one without is maybe held back because of the one with the learning disability. So there's so many sort of variations. So I think, you know, having that some sort of like inclusion, like you said, and mixing more, integrating more with different types, and that's when you learn, that's when people also outside can learn and accommodate. And I think for the person that's dealing with it can actually cope better, knowing that everyday life can still be as normal as possible, because they are not holding themselves back. And if they are, then they're not actually educating outward or themselves and giving the space for other people to even be included in their struggle, to give them the support or the understanding or whatever it may be. So I think that so far we have touched on these things, which is really important. But I just want to go back to more about learning. Learning generally is so much widely obviously promoted in Islam. And when we have a duty, what are the duties and the accountability of people that do struggle? Because maybe it could be something just like, okay, autism or just having dyslexia or things like that, and sometimes more extreme. Now, how are we accountable as individuals when we have these sort of struggles and challenges, and what are the expectations upon us? Because we know as adults we are accountable, but are we accountable even if we don't pray all the time, if we can't pray? And you know, where does the religion come and sort of help in that way? What is the rulings on that?
A few years ago, I had a client. He came to me and said that, Molana, if you take an exam of me about Islamic education, Islamic teachings, about Quran, history, akhlaq, everything, I can guarantee you that I will get 100% marks. And this is how he passed.
Okay.
But he said, in practice, I do everything wrong.
Wow. Okay, which is very, very common.
So, I do everything. I mean, he was admitting to me that I do everything wrong. I do everything that I was taught against it.
Right.
And I said, so what is the reason why? If you could achieve 100% marks on all Islamic subjects, but in practice, he said the reason is that Islam was taught to me as a subject that I had to pass in my exams to get to the next level. I became like a computer, memorized the verses of Holy Quran, and I could give the addresses and everything. But nobody taught me how to behave, how to learn lessons from the examples of Ahlebait Tv, or the teacher who was teaching me was just concerned in my achievement, academic achievements, and nothing was being transferred to me which could change my life.
Wow.
So that is the reason. So unfortunately, recently we have so much success rates, and I keep hearing and receiving emails. And nowadays, with the existence of social media, something happens in one part of the world, within a few minutes you receive it. That a 5-year-old child has memorized the whole of the Quran, and he can give references like computer. But what we need to look at this 5-year-old child 10 years later, 15 years later, how he would or she would behave in the society. Has he digested or she digested Islam with the examples that were set in front of him? Unfortunately not. Sometimes the same children who are forced into ignoring their childhood and becoming like a computer, and then later on they miss and regret everything.
So important.
That is wrong. I mean, we should learn from there's nothing wrong to learn from non-Muslims. There are some countries where the education hours are being reduced, and education is, the knowledge is being given to the children while they are playing and going into different environment, and like going in nature and learning things like homeschooling.
Yeah, I think you've said something so vital, because I think we look at education in a really limiting way, and our religion does not talk of knowledge and gaining knowledge in the way in which we look at it today. Majority of the time it's just academic, and as the Sayyid had mentioned, it's about just getting the grades and getting to the next level, even especially Islamically, even in our schools and mosques when we enter during the months of Ramadan and Muharram, you know, it's like a routine spiritually, but are we actually practicing in between even our salah? Are we actually doing things in between the real rituals that we are, you know, supposedly doing, between, you know, giving charity and performing the pilgrimage? How do we come back out of the masjid? How do we come back out of the mosques and behave with our friends straight after even the majlis? These things are really, that's real education and learning. That shows what you are. And I think we are slowly failing in that more and more. But now that you said that you are actually in the mosque and you do sort of, you know, work alongside that, do you see anything in particular that's actually bridging that gap where it's not just only academic?
Well, like in the classes, for example, in Muharram and Ramadan, that we have classes for the youth, for the children. And we have a lot of people that have children with disabilities. The children actually do attend those classes as well. So they're part and parcel of, you know, the whole group. If they do a play which they prepare for the parents, they also have a role within the play, a role that they're able to manage. So the support is given, and whatever they do is within their means, whatever they can manage. It doesn't necessarily have to be at a particular standard or a particular level.
What about people that haven't got learning disabilities and they are just learning? Do you think it's just academic learning that's being promoted, or do you think it is a way of life, as in how we need to be in our religion? Do you think that is being emphasized enough?
Well, within the community that I'm in, it is.
Yeah, I've seen that
it's
myself.
become the way Islamic studies is taught is through a way of life. It's through stories and understanding, good nature, being nice to people, having respect. And understanding the messages of the imams and prophets and their stories as well. So it's bringing Islam to life and living it every day, rather than being taught, going home and forgetting about it.
Yeah, and just like a history lesson or something like that. Because I know I personally was invited to Stanmore to give a talk to girls about hijab, and I currently give Arabic assembly to the students in school, and I do sort of try to imprint current practical lessons, but taking from the past and taking from the religious scriptures as well. But you've got to bring it to life today, which is really important. And I think parents' input is quite vital. And I know even with, you know, both parents working like yourself, you work, you have your own family, and yet you still give your time elsewhere, and you are involved in the community on your own voluntarily and doing so much, and you are an example and a role model for this. And I know the Sayyid himself has been doing years of work with the community and helping families and individuals in the same light. And that's why I'm bringing people here to show it is possible. It is happening. It is definitely there. You know, you're a full-time mom. You have the same, you know, excuses that everyone else can make, but yet you're still doing it, and you're still giving up even from your own job and giving back to the community, even sitting here and giving me your time to share to the audience in order to bring this awareness and insight. It is so vital, and that's what I want to highlight, because our religion is so fruitful, and it's all about this. This is it. This is us living it. And we need to have more individuals like that. We need to have more children growing up knowing this, that it's not just the normal ritual. That is their set, and that is the foundation, and it's a good core. But we need to start learning more about virtues and building strong characters. Now, when you are having learning disability, I know there's different types, but when it comes to building character, and I know there's certain hindrance, but do you think that we can still build certain virtues within children or growing, you know, teenagers into adults with some characteristics that we can actually take Islamically and manage them in the Islamic way? And does that spirituality also help in their growth?
I think so. I think the spirituality gives them a full roundedness. It's a very holistic, they become a very holistic person, just like we do, and I think they need that as well. There are many girls, for example, that have learned disability within our community that have embraced the hijab as well and have worn the hijab and managed it well.
Amazing.
You know, they're praying namaz and najas and taharat, they're abiding to all the things that we abide to as well. But in fact, to some extent, I feel from observation that they take it more weighty than us. They appreciate it so much more. And that's simply come from the parents and the way the parents have fed in so much love into these children. You know, the love for Islam, the love for hijab.
Yeah, they've taken more interest.
They have taken so much interest in their children, and you know, they don't get tired of repeating, and this is where we need to be mindful of parents as well that have children with disabilities. We need to be there to support them because they are patient. Just you had explained before, they're very patient. They will repeat, show, explain again and again. They would not get angry. However, where do they take their frustrations? How do they manage their emotions? That's another thing we need to look at. You know, how do we manage the mental health of parents that have children with disabilities? And what are we doing for them?
Absolutely. And I think also what you've said is so important, that we are complaining as normal parents with, you know, kind of normal average children, you know, they're not doing this, or we have to repeat, and it's so much. And to hear you say that parents with real challenges are managing and, you know, supporting their children, and their children are actually flourishing and accepting and doing things that you would think that is probably not really possible, that's just an insight in itself. And that just should show us all that we should only just, you know, take more interest and embrace what we believe in, and anything is really possible. And I think it's so important what you've said there, because I know everyday parents, including myself, will just sort of say, oh, you know, children are in a particular way and it's so different and so, you know, hard, and it's this and it's that, and we cannot teach them. But we have to understand the different levels of development just normally. But with disability and with that sort of hindrance, if that's possible, if that's what you're saying,
Definitely
then
possible.
it is so unbelievable, really, really unbelievable. So when we have issues around behavior and expression, how can we now, just if we were in society, what do you think could be some of the solutions that we can take upon ourselves, and responsible, you know, Muslims, if we go into the majlis, if we go into the mosques and centers, if we see, you know, clearly there are some children that have got, you know, anxiousness, or they're pretty hyperactive or things like that, what is our responsibility? What can be the solutions that, you know, people can today, you know, look and reflect upon themselves, and instead of saying, well, I'm going to change my attitude, I'm going to change my ways, what would be the things that you would sort of advise to a certain extent that we can actually use? Because I want people to go home and actually change. I want them to transform for the better, and using some examples of maybe what they've heard today.
So I would say to make changes within your community, as a parent of a child with a disability, you need to be open and actually speak to people within the community, not to shy away.
Yeah.
Explain the situation, say that your child has a learning disability, you want this child to be part of the community. Obviously, if that child has anxiety, you don't want to go and sit right at the front, you know, right in the front row, because you're going to just, you know, with the amount of people there, and the whole, you know, the environment, the majalis, it can sometimes get too much. So initially,
Just sort of normal. Yeah.
So initially, it might be worth sitting further back. But have a dialogue with the volunteers as well. Build awareness, because you have the opportunity to build awareness for your child as well as other children that may come in the future. Then slowly work your way through to the front of the mosque if that's where you want to be sitting. But it's not fair to bring the child in and sit where you would want to sit, obviously. But most parents with children with disabilities understand their own child and would know. But if we don't communicate that to the volunteers, and explain we're going to be sitting here today because of this reason, they would not know how to
Respond, yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, and I think again we also need to emphasize that attitudes do need to change. We do need to be a little bit more inviting and accommodating, because sometimes, yes, I know there's spaces for mothers and babies and we don't want to have sometimes crying children, it does disturb us, but actually it can be part of it. I know of really professional Western society that have huge gatherings and they will be giving talks, and I've attended myself, and they're like, if you've got a child sitting here, if they're screaming, please do not be alarmed. It is just part of us in a society as humans, and you know what, just excuse them, and you know, I'll raise my voice a little bit and we'll speak a little bit louder. It doesn't have to be constantly this attitude of, you know, go and sit in one corner, or you know, tell the child off because you know they're making a little bit of noise, or they're running around, or they're not sitting up straight and they're sitting, or they're lying down for a moment. I know we should have space, I know we want to obviously concentrate, but that's also part of etiquette, that's part of akhlaq, that's part of, you know, human behavior towards another human behavior, and you know, you being accommodating, you showing your manners as well. And just because you're the adult, just because you're the older, sometimes the elderly sometimes do not have the patience for the young, or the young, you know, don't have the patience for the elder. It works both ways, and it's a learning, and we need to bridge those gaps. We cannot always have that separation and the separate halls, and we don't have the room. Sometimes it's overfilled and someone comes in late. Let them sit there. It's fine if their child is a little bit disturbing. It's okay. It's part of the majalis. Let it be part of it to a certain extent. We can accommodate. So I think that's really important. So Sayyid, before we end, as we are coming to the end of the show, you've given us so much insight, so much that's really, you know, ignited what I really wanted to say and highlighted, and you've come from real source. And I think it's really important, you know, to have your backing and to have your knowledge. So what would you like to sort of give some final words before we end? Because it's really an important topic and subject, and we've talked, you know, generally, but inshallah we can sort of give some final words.
Yeah. While Sister was mentioning about repeating, it reminded me of the verses of Holy Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells Prophet Mahomed, ذَكِّرْ فَإِنَّ الذِّكْرَ تَنْفَعُ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that repeat, because this repetition is beneficial for the people.
Absolutely.
And we need to be reminded. I mean, look at the poems and the stories that children repeat every day in their daily life, and they remember for the rest of them until they have their own children. They teach them the same thing.
Definitely.
So if we wrote stories and compiled poems about Islam and Islamic things, Islamic behavior, and repeated them in the life of the children, that would become the norm, and they will remember that forever. So repetition is very important. It's a good reminder for us and a good reminder for them, and that's why when we are born, azan and iqama is given in the ears of our child, and when we die, the last message that is given is a reminder to the deceased that remember that you believe in Allah, remember that you believe in prophets and imams. So these reminders are good, and they should not just become rigid reminders. They should be reminders with practice and with proper behavior, so it remains like a calming in the mind of the child.
Definitely. Farzana, thank you so much for, you know, your time and, you know, all your insights and all your experience. It's been amazing sitting with you. If anyone wants to reach you, please call the studio. You have, you know, amazing work that you're doing, and I really, really admire you. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you so much, Sayyid. And once again, thank you, dear viewers, for watching. I hope this has been helpful. I hope that it's given us a little bit more of education and learning so that we can transform ourselves, because we're only here to, you know, be on a journey, and, you know, Islam is becoming. We're not going to be fully there, but we're constantly becoming. We're becoming more, and that's why I want to highlight that, inshallah, we're only going to become more of what we need to be. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for the viewers, for the callers, and inshallah we will be back next week. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi.